chased by Dogman through Michigan. Dear Scary Stories NYC. When my son and I set out to hike Canyon Falls Trail in Michigan, we were looking forward to waterfalls and scenic beauty. We were entirely unprepared to be chased through the woods like we were meat by the Dogman. As my son and I set out on our hike in northern Michigan, I couldn't help but feel a sense of excitement. The sun was shining down on us warmly, and I could feel the relaxation of the forest envelop me. The trail was surrounded by lush foliage, with towering trees extending up to the sky. The scent of pine and cedar filled the air, and I took in a deep breath, relishing the refreshing aroma. As we walked, we were greeted by various creatures. A family of deer grazed in the distance, and we could hear the chirping of birds above our heads. Once we came across a little snake resting on a branch, and my son was fascinated. We passed fields of vivid wildflowers, with each step offering new and mesmerizing plants. I pointed out the refreshing scent of spearmint near the water's edge, and informed my son how Native Americans had used it for medicinal purposes. It turned out he knew way more about that than I did, and oh boy did I get a long lecture about the many uses of spearmint. We walked for the entire morning and afternoon, having quite an enjoyable day. But as fun as the day had been, when the sun began to set, I started to feel a sense of unease creeping over me. I couldn't shake off the feeling that something was following us. I kept looking around, but I couldn't spot anything out of the ordinary. My son seemed to be lost in his own world, snapping pictures of wildlife with his camera. Suddenly a dark figure off in the foliage in the distance caught my eye. It was too tall to be a human, or an animal, and it walked like a man in either case. I nudged my son and asked him if he could see that too. He looked up and he gasped. The dark figure was closing in on us, and so we started to run, not having any idea what we were running from. As we sprinted through the woods, my heart was pounding in my chest, and I could hear the sound of my own labored breathing. The creature was still chasing us, and I could hear its heavy footsteps echoing through the trees. It was closing in, and I knew we had to do something. We came to a small clearing and decided to make our stand. We turned around, and that's when I saw it. It was a 12-foot-tall creature, and muscular, with the body of a man and the head of a dog. I had heard stories about these creatures before, called Dogman. I had always dismissed them as just a legend, but here we were, facing a real Dogman. The creature didn't hesitate. It lunged at us, and we had to dive out of the way to avoid being caught. After missing us, the beast stopped running and began to bellow out loud. It sounded more like he was threatening us than howling for others of his kind, but I wouldn't really know in either case. While he stood there screaming, we kept running, desperate to find a way out of the forest. The creature was soon enough back to chasing us, and I could hear its heavy breaths coming closer. As we continued running through the overgrown forest, the howls or screams of the Dogman echoed through the trees. Suddenly, in the distance, I saw the faint outline of a cabin. "We have to get to that cabin," I shouted to my son. As we neared it, the howls grew louder and more intense. We could hear the Dogman crashing through the brush behind us, gaining on us with every passing moment. My legs ached as I raced through the undergrowth, fear pulsing through my veins. Just as we reached the tiny wooden cottage, barely larger than a shack, I heard the Dogman's terrible snarl close behind us. Turning around, I saw it barrel toward us, its eyes glowing in the dark. We were trapped. With no other options, we scrambled up the front steps of the cabin and shoved the door open, hurrying inside and slamming it shut behind us. The cabin was old and musty, with peeling wallpaper and creaky floorboards, but it was a refuge from the Dogman, at least for now. Panting heavily, we looked around for any signs of danger, but the cabin appeared to be empty. We were alone in the middle of nowhere, with the Dogman just outside our door. As we huddled together, trying to come up with a plan, we heard scratching at the door. The Dogman was trying to get inside. We looked at each other, eyes wide with terror. We had to come up with something, and fast. We began to pray fervently, asking God to protect us and keep us safe. The sound of gunfire outside made us all jump, and through the window we could see the Dogman running off into the darkness. But who had fired the shot? Suddenly the door burst open, and a grizzled old man stood in that doorway, holding a shotgun. "What in tarnation are you doing in my cabin?" he bellowed. "Get out of here, you troublemakers." I tried to explain our situation, but he wouldn't listen. He continued to yell at us, telling us to leave his property immediately. We gathered our things quickly and left, knowing that we were walking out into the Dogman's forest. We walked a ways and then came across a small clearing. It wasn't much, but it was enough to set up camp for the night. We quickly built a fire and settled in, hoping for some sort of reprieve from the chaos of the day. As we sat around the fire, I couldn't help but feel hopeful. Maybe we had finally found a safe haven, a place where we could gather our thoughts and come up with a plan for our next steps. But then we heard it, a low growl in the distance, followed by the sound of something moving through the woods. My heart sank as I realized that Dogman had found us again. We quickly moved to pack up our things, but before we could even start, it burst through the tree line. Its eyes gleamed in the firelight, and I knew we were in trouble. We tried to run, but it was too fast. It chased us through the woods, its barks echoing through the darkness. We ran and ran, our hearts pounding in our chests, but it was relentless. We could hear it getting closer and closer, its breath hot on our heels. Finally, we came across a climbable and very tall tree, and I pushed my son toward it. "Climb up," I yelled, pushing him forward. He scrambled up the trunk as I turned toward the Dogman, hoping to buy enough time for my son to get to safety. I picked up a nearby stick and I held it out in front of me, ready to defend myself. But it was no use. The Dogman was too powerful, too strong. It leapt forward and knocked me to the ground, its jaws gnashing at my face. I closed my eyes, ready for the end, but then I heard a gunshot, followed by the sound of something hitting the ground running. The pressure was off my chest. The Dogman had run off. When I opened my eyes, sure enough, the Dogman was gone. And standing over my body, looking down at me, was the grizzled old man, holding a smoking shotgun. "You folks need to be more careful," he said, as he helped me to my feet. "This place ain't safe." I nodded, still in shock from what had just happened. The old man took us into his place and allowed us to try sleeping sitting up on the floor until the sun came back up. When we went back to our abandoned camp in the morning, we found our tents and backpacks torn, with many of our personal items tossed in the now smoldering campfire. Plastic does not smell good when it burns, and neither does whatever cell phones are made of. So I know that there are some nice Dogman out there, but this clearly was not one of them. And that was the upsetting end to a nightmarish hiking trip when we went to northern Michigan, and we almost didn't come back. Dogman on motorcycle means doom. Dear Scary Stories NYC, I have a weird relationship with Kelly Road in Industry, Pennsylvania. They say it's a haunted road, so it is supposed to be weird there. But some of my friends and I keep seeing something that we can't find in any of the folklore about that spooky road. We see a Dogman over there, and each time we do, something terrible happens to our car before 24 hours are up. I know it sounds like a superstition, so I'll just tell you literally what happened, and then you can tell me what this is all about. I admit we may have brought this on ourselves, because we went there legend tripping back before the pandemic, looking to see something spooky. I think that was when whatever it is that's over there noticed us, and I think it decided to show us something spooky for the rest of our lives. First of all, if you don't already know, Kelly Road, which runs between Engle Road and Wolf Run Road, is known to get foggy at night and in the morning, which just adds to the creepy vibe of the place. And that is what the legend of Kelly Road is about. A bad vibe. People are known to lose their temper and fly off the handle over there. And not just humans either. Animals flip out and attack for no reason. One of my friends told me that his cousin got attacked by a deer on Kelly Road, which is a weird thing for me to even picture in my head. So it is a really strange place. When I saw the Dogman there for the first time, I kind of felt like he was the spirit of that place, maybe. Or maybe he's the reason for the bad vibe. Because we're talking about one badass, scary Dogman. The first time we saw him was the first time we went to Kelly Road. And it was a pretty grand entrance. We were going through one of the two forested areas, and around a curve, driving way too fast, was a motorcycle with the largest driver you can imagine. It was almost like a bear riding a motorcycle, but it was this werewolf. A werewolf with leather boots on, if you can imagine. He started driving right at us, and my friend Oscar, who was at the wheel, turned and drove straight into a tree. His dad's car was wrecked, and so was our night. But at least that Dogman didn't turn his bike around and come back to finish us off. My mother made me chip in to Oscar's car repair fund, but my other two friends got away scot-free. That was the last time Oscar went joyriding in his life, man. It took him so long to pay his dad back for those repairs. We were just lucky we weren't hurt. That was the way I looked at it, and I was ready to put the entire bizarre episode behind me. But I kept dreaming about that Dogman or werewolf. It's kind of a hard image to get out of your head once you've seen it with your own eyes. It was a Dogman, but it was riding a motorbike. I mean, what planet do we live on? So as fate would have it, I got a job running errands for this company, and when I needed to get paid, I would have to visit the boss who I swear you was living back then on Kelly Road. Every time I went there, I felt scared. I've never once felt angry on Kelly, which is I know how you're supposed to feel. But I really dread driving down that road. I feel like I'm being watched every time I do it. So after I think it was 2 or 3 months of me going to Kelly Road to get paid, I started to feel more comfortable about it. One night I was driving over to get my money, and I had one of my buddies with me who had been there when the motorcycle riding Dogman came around that curve trying to run us off the road. He was remembering that night out loud as I drove, and I was getting creeped out because it was a dark evening as this was happening. When we got to the curve, the beast man had come around too fast that night. I couldn't help myself. I just slowed down a bit, and I pulled over to the right just a bit as well. And then whiz, around that curve came the huge, wide Dogman, driving his motorbike way too fast and cutting it way too close on my side. I finished pulling the car off the road and let him pass, since I had slowed down beforehand. Did my buddy and I cause that to happen by talking about it? I mean, that was not something ordinary that happened. The timing of it was like something from a movie. It couldn't have been an accident. Let's just say that much at least. I figured I was lucky, but the next morning, my car wouldn't start, and it never started again. I had to sell it for parts, but there was an upside to losing that car. It meant I had to quit that job that caused me to have to drive on Kelly Road. One of my other friends I'll call Serge, who was there at that first sighting and crash, told me that he also saw the Dogman riding the motorcycle one more time, but it was at a different part of the road, and it just drove past. It didn't try to run him off the road. However, a few blocks later, some other guy ran a red light and slammed hard into Serge's fender, knocking his bumper right off the car and destroying one of his headlights. At least the car kept running and didn't need to be trashed. I'd say maybe the Dogman is losing his touch, but I'm pretty sure that would get me 40 years bad luck if I said that. I know that I plan on never visiting Kelly Road again for the rest of my life, but somehow I sense that even if I packed my bags and moved to California, fate would still somehow, some way, send me back to Pennsylvania, and I'd find myself driving down Kelly Road all over again. And when I do, I'd better be able to afford myself a new car, because that Dogman will be waiting for me around that curve just up ahead.
It's a classic pullover, play with the scary stories, got it. It's a classic pullover, put it in a stand-up to logo. Available in white, black, navy, gray, or pink. Link is in the description.
Dogman and the Manson women. Dear Scary Stories NYC. There's this former office building off the highway at the edge of my town, and I used to go over there when I was a teenager to set off firecrackers. There was plenty of space in the back that used to be a parking lot, and I could fire off rockets without them landing in the woods and starting a fire. Also, no adults knew about that place, so I felt safe. I was the kind of teenager that liked to be alone, and that place was lonely. Usually. On this particular day, as I was about to walk out of the woods behind the old abandoned building on my side, some figures walked out from the opposite side. My first impression was that they looked like older kids, so I jumped behind a tree and peeked out. What I saw blew my mind. It was these two Manson girls, you know? These two young women, sorta scantily clad and low-class looking, but their bikini tops and designer jeans looked expensive. Good rich girls gone bad. That was my first impression at a distance. The guy they were walking with hung back at first. He seemed to be playing with his little black and white yappy dog. I could see that they were talking, but with the distance between us and the nearness of the highway, the only one I could really hear clearly was that loudmouth little dog. So now, some of you might remember that I promised my mind was blown by what I saw, and unless those poor little rich girls were the most beautiful of all time, and they weren't, then I have yet to describe something mind-blowing. So let's get started with that then, shall we? When the male companion of the two young ladies walked out into the afternoon sun, I saw the first cryptid of my life. At least, he looked like a cryptid. I nearly fainted because he was this brown dog man. He had a dog head, and he was walking like a human. The thing is, I think he was really a werewolf, and not a dog man, because he seemed too intelligent to be just an animal. And also, he was wearing gloves. So was the taller of the two girls, in fact. They were black gloves, maybe rubber or something like that. They were shiny, and extended a few inches past the wrist in a slightly flared-out style, like a superhero glove, sort of. His matched hers. The shorter girl did not have these gloves on. All of them seemed jolly and merry, as though they were having a super fun day. And in that instant, I thought those were the coolest-looking girls in the world. I was a teenager, though. I was naive and quite innocent about women, for another 5 or 6 months at least. So yes, I did sort of wonder if it could have been a cosplayer in that Wolfman costume. But it was a really hot day. I was in shorts. The girls were in bikini tops. That guy would faint if he were wearing a monkey suit. He had to actually be a creature that looked like a dogman. But how would you go about getting rubber gloves on a dogman? He had to have put them on himself, which to me makes him more likely a werewolf than a dogman. He also seemed to be speaking to the girls, although I was too far away to hear any words. For all I know, he might have been barking at them. So I watched in secret as the group made their way over to a mound of dirt on the side of the office building, that I hadn't noticed before. Something about that mound of dirt made the girls laugh out loud and point at it. I couldn't even imagine what they were seeing from my point of view, so I just kept looking. All three of them seemed to thoroughly enjoy whatever was over there, and they laughed uproariously. Eventually, they grew tired of whatever they were doing, and the three of them with their little dog walked back the way they came. I waited for some time, then I snuck over to that mound of dirt to view it from the angle that they had. It was a mound of dirt. A freshly dug mound of dirt. What was so funny about that? I was about to leave when I thought I saw the dirt move. I stayed there, watching, trying to see it move again. I saw nothing, and nothing, and my mind drifted to the idea that setting off firecrackers might be more interesting than staring at dirt. But then, that pile of dirt definitely moved. There was something alive in that dirt. Without thinking, I dug into the mound, and I found a woman tied up and gagged, covered in dirt, and left for dead. I untied her, and I ripped her gag out so she could breathe, but she did not thank me. Instead, she rose up and threw me to the ground, and I fell back hard, almost losing consciousness from the force of it. It was my adrenaline that kept my eyes open, as I saw this woman I had freed, clearly, for the first time. She seemed to be some kind of half-human, half-animal thing. She was probably a werewolf too. I had wandered into some kind of intra-tribal werewolf warfare. I thought that beast woman was going to bite my face off, but instead she ran off into the woods the way I had come. I tell you, I didn't mind walking along the highway to get back home. It took an extra 40 minutes, but I didn't have to cut through any dark woods that I had just seen some kind of dog woman run into. I wonder if those two bikini-topped women were werewolves also, or if they were just that wolfman's groupies. I have wondered about all of them since this happened, but I studiously avoided that area, never returning after that day. And so, at least so far, that was the last time that I ever saw Dogman and the Manson women. This next part is not just some filler. This is where we all say thanks to Stacy Miller. Please join me in thanking tonight's executive producer, Stacy Miller, who is a member of our PayPal subscribers club at peterbernard.com. Her club membership means Stacy gets to see our secret uncensored episodes Far Too Wild to run on this channel. And so can you. Here comes our international TV spokesmongrel, Henry Lee Dogman, to fill you in on the deets. Thanks, Biggie. And thanks to all of you for watching this far. If you liked it, please click like. If you'd like to see more of our work, please subscribe. And also click that bell icon if you'd like to be notified when we put out a new episode. To become an executive producer, you can donate to us through the thanks button under each of our videos or through our paypal.me/PeterBernard209 page. To receive cool perks like secret uncensored Dogman episodes Far Too Wild to ever run on this channel, you can become a YouTube channel member by clicking the join button, or join our PayPal subscribers club at peterbernard.com. Joining either at the $3 a month level or above gets you access to our over 25 hours of secret uncensored Dogman stories available nowhere else. Do you have a scary story about Dogman or some other kind of high strangeness that happened to you? Let us know by emailing us at scarystoriesnyc@gmail.com or by leaving us a voicemail message at 804-LA-SCARY. You may need to call back on that one. It cuts off after I think 3 minutes. And if you don't want to do any of that stuff, thank you for simply watching to the end. Good night, and have a scary tomorrow.
Come back for more scary stories.